The top business stories, live from the Sky newsroom. The complete shutdown of Europe's biggest airport. Could it, should it have been avoided? We'll bring you an exclusive interview with Microsoft's head of cybersecurity. He tells us that the tech firm is seeing a massive increase in the number of financial crime gangs. As Tesla shares jump thanks to autonomous driving, we're going to speak to Uber. The hope a project in Texas could pave the way for self-driving taxis here in the UK. Plus, why the cost of a pint just keeps going in one direction, on the rise. Darren McCaffrey. We're going to start off with Heathrow. The head of the National Grid says that the airport had enough power to continue its operations despite the fire at one electricity substation. Europe's biggest and busiest airport grinded to a halt, of course, on Friday. Passengers were stranded across the globe. And there have been questions all weekend over how a small fire could lead to such disruption. Well, this was the Transport Secretary, Haile Alexander, speaking in the Commons within the last hour.
The airport has a range of backup generators and uninterruptible power supplies, including diesel generators, to provide power to essential systems to enable them to safely land planes. These backup systems ensured safety and security systems and protocols were maintained at all times, but they were never designed to support full operation of the whole airport.
We're going to speak to Anita Mendarata, who is an aviation and tourism consultant. Very good afternoon to you, Anita. We spoke on Friday, didn't we, in the midst of this fire and the disruption. Things have obviously calmed down, but the fighting over who's to blame has only just begun.
It has, and it's a pity because it's actually eclipsing the fact that there are bigger questions that need to be answered. There are two areas to this, Darren, and when you and I spoke on Friday at the very beginning of this, we saw this very much to be an issue, that as we know, 1,300 flights, almost 300,000 people, 75 airlines were impacted by this. So there are the operational questions in terms of energy supply. How did this happen? Why did one fire cause all of this disruption? But then there's the impact of the disruption and making sure that we don't lose sight of that. We've heard from Secretary Alexander's comments that the investigation is unfolding, and we're going to look at why these backup plans, why ultimately the built-in redundancies were not mobilized. Because ultimately, we know that every airport has its emergency operations center. What we need to understand was what was the flow of energy? Why was it not able to be managed across the backup systems that existed? And on top of that, how did the emergency operations center actually mobilize its people? What about the leadership itself? Where was the CEO in terms of the presence within those first critical hours of any crisis, the first three? Are people able to stand forward and say that when we say an airport is fully operational, it's not just about the airport operations, it's the passengers, it's the cargo, it's the partners and the customers, i.e. the airlines. Until everything is back to where it needs to be, the airport is not fully operational.
And, you know, you and I weren't in the room, but what's your understanding then of that decision made, I think, in the early hours of Friday morning to close down this airport? I mean, that clearly within the decision, and I think it was made in the end ultimately by the chief operating officer, that he clearly would not want to have made.
Indeed. And this is a really important factor that you mentioned, that in any crisis situation, the leader must be visible. They must be audible. They must be accountable. So the fact that the leader was not present during that time, for whatever reasons, putting the pressure on the COO to then make such a fundamental decision is incredibly damaging. And it's quite damning because it impacts reputation, it impacts confidence, and it's not just the impact on ultimately Heathrow, but also on BAA and the UK itself.
So Anita, are you essentially then saying that the decision, I mean, I think the Heathrow's position is the CEO effectively went to bed because he wanted to be in good condition and well rested for the fallout on Friday. You think that was the wrong call to make, effectively?
I think it was an incredibly unfortunate and dangerous call to make because by the time he made the call, my understanding based on the intelligence we have was 7:30 in the morning. So effectively that was 6 hours after the airport was declared quiet. Everything was mobilized by that point in time. And again, what does this say? So Darren, if you were not in the studio as you are, but if you were a passenger somewhere, to hear that the CEO of an organization during the peak hours of a crisis chose to go to bed, it doesn't help the situation at all. And that's why I say the reputational damage to Heathrow is massive.
And just very finally, Anita, looking forward, if you like, there's been lots of questions, not just about Heathrow's resilience, but indeed the other airports, major airports here in the UK. What now needs to change effectively?
Very much so, from, again, speaking to my sources who work directly in airports at senior leadership level. It's very much about putting in basic plans for building in the redundancies. That is fundamentally critical to any critical resources, water, energy, cyber side as well, but also testing protocols. This is where airports should be putting in protocols of when, especially in Heathrow, where we have curfews, shutting down the airport when it's dark, being able to test the ability and the resilience for the airport to turn back on again. All of these should have been in place because until those are tested, until everyone knows almost at a DNA level,
We seem to...
we're never going to be...
You just cut out, but we got the essence of what you had to say, Anita. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Sky News this afternoon. Thank you. Now, Microsoft are warning about a sharp increase in the scale and speeds and the sophistication of cyber attacks. The company is unveiling artificial intelligence which will help deal with threats, called a security co-pilot, AI agents. Speaking to our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, Microsoft's head of cybersecurity, Vasu Jackal, said the tech firm was tracking more financial crime groups than ever before. Here is Tom's exclusive interview.
We've seen an increase in the scale, the speed, and the sophistication of attacks. From a speed perspective, on average, it takes 72 minutes or less now from when an attacker or from when a user clicks on a phishing link for an attacker to get access to that data. So that time is shrinking. From a scale perspective, we are seeing more and more attacks. I talked about the 7,000 password attacks per second. That's a lot to deal with. And then we are tracking 1,500 unique nation-state and financial crime groups today. That number was 300 last year. So it's an increase of 5x year over year that we're tracking. So I would say that we are facing unprecedented complexity when it comes to the threat landscape. Last year, at about this time, we were tracking 4,000 password attacks per second. This year, it's 7,000 password attacks per second.
Right.
To translate that, like every day, we are facing 600 million attacks per second. And that's the sheer volume that defenders and organizations are facing every day.
So help me understand how AI agents can improve the job that so far is done by, IT specialists, security experts within businesses around the world.
Last year, we tracked 30 billion phishing emails from Jan to December 2024. There's no way any human can keep up with the volume of phishing emails. So we have a phishing agent, and what this phishing agent does is it goes through these volumes of phishing emails, and it helps isolate what are real, what are false, and kind of reduce that volume. And then for the ones that are real, it helps the human take action. So that's what an agent is. What we're seeing is that the global cybercrime industry is $9.2 trillion today. So that's how much it's costing our world. And if it was a country, it would be the third largest GDP, and it would be growing at the fastest rate. What is getting harder is the barriers to entry for being a criminal have reduced. So you can very easily find these toolkits and launch an attack against an organization, which is why these numbers are pretty daunting for us. So yeah, we see that sophistication, we see that sort of global proliferation as well, and easier access that they have to technology. And this is, one of the reasons, again, we are doing all we can to innovate using AI. the reality is when you don't get access to medicines, when you go to hospitals and systems are down because you can't even schedule an appointment, when your local bakery has to go out of business because they can't get their business online, or the ransom they had to pay is not going to help them survive that attack. When your power grid or your energy systems may be at risk. These are like real human impact.
Now let's talk about Morrison's, the supermarket chain, because it's closing 52 of its cafes, 17 convenience stores and dozens of its meat and fish counters, putting hundreds of jobs at risk. The store closures will be Morrison's daily stores, which are smaller convenience ones, but they will open for extended hours. It's expected the cuts will be rolled out over the next couple of months. Morrison's has been under pressure, if you like, over the last couple of years, not least of all from the German discounters Aldi and Lidl. Aldi overtook Morrison's as the UK's fourth biggest supermarket chain in 2022. Effectively, the company, though, is blaming in part the Chancellor's decision to increase national insurance contributions for employers as one of the reasons that it is cutting these jobs, in addition to the fact that it is not proving to be as profitable as they would like. Now, a pint of beer is about to reach an important and costly milestone. £5, yes, £5. Well, I think a Camden Hells costs a lot more than that. But anyway, for your average pint, across the country, that's what it's going to go up to next month. The British Beer and Pub Association say punters will see an increase of 21p to £5 and 1 pence in April as the sector feels the impact also of the Chancellor's budget. Landlords have been left, they argue, with no choice but to raise prices to offset those tax increases. Now, Tesla's share price has jumped back up today after a long streak in the red. Stocks had fallen some 38% so far this year, but the EV giant is about to roll out its highest level driver assistant product in China, called full self-driving, or FSD for short. And it comes as Uber also prepares to roll out autonomous vehicles in Texas in a more meaningful way. And they're arguing that it could pave the way for a similar service here in the UK. Well, earlier I spoke to the global head of autonomous mobility and delivery at Uber.
Yeah, so we're really excited here today. Vehicles are live on the streets in Austin, Texas. We have been running here with Waymo. We started here in the US with Phoenix with them, and now we're scaling up from dozens of vehicles in Austin today up to hundreds of vehicles coming soon.
And is the experience, because again there have been concerns elsewhere in the United States, has the experience been safe? Has it worked? Or frankly, also importantly, the customer's happy?
Yeah, so a really great question. You know, ourselves at Uber as well as Waymo take safety as one of our highest priorities. And so we work very hard to make sure across the whole spectrum of participants, from everybody who, on the Waymo side, they've run millions and millions of miles of testing and simulation and validation to ensure the technology really is truly ready to operate driverless on the roads here. We also work closely with our fleet operator here at Waymo and making sure that all maintenance procedures are done properly, the vehicles are regularly maintained, the cameras are cleaned, ensuring that really safety is always being well taken care of. And what that's resulted in is really actually customers being very happy with the experience that they get. You know, they request a ride and an autonomous vehicle comes up, and that's really exciting for a lot of people. It's their first experience with an autonomous vehicle, and similar to how a lot of people here probably got their first experience riding in an electric vehicle when they called a car on Uber and happened to have one come up and take them for a ride. We're seeing the same thing happen with autonomous vehicles now today.
You as a user, you can decide which one you want in terms of kind of the menu of options, is that right?
So what we do today is that you request a ride, and if it turns out that an autonomous vehicle will be well suited to take that trip for you, if there's one close by, if it can do the trip well, we'll match you to that trip, but we'll offer it to you. And so riders will see a screen come up that say, hey, you've been matched with an autonomous vehicle. There's some information so that they can learn more, they can have trust in the technology, and if they're excited for it, they can say yes, and the autonomous vehicle will come pick them up. If they're not quite ready yet, they can ask actually potentially to be rematched for a human driver and try again another time.
Now, there are millions of people who use Uber every day, millions of journeys across the world. I mean, those by autonomous vehicles are still, I'm sure, way, way less than 1%. They're probably a decimal place, aren't they, in terms of user experience. We're in the UK. When can we expect, you know, what people in London, for example, or other major cities here in the UK, to have the option or the opportunity to use an autonomous vehicle?
Yeah, so I think the UK is definitely on the top of our list in terms of places to expand internationally and in Europe. We're really excited to see the progress that's been made on the regulatory front. Just last year, obviously, there have been some really strong technology developments as well as regulatory developments in order to create the framework that would allow autonomous vehicles not just to be tested, but actually to proceed into real commercial passenger operations. So we're excited to see that continue to develop over the next couple years. We're partnered with Wave there in the UK, who already has a lot of vehicles running on the streets in London, and we're really excited for what comes in the next couple years.
And just finding that in terms of the challenges, I mean, where are we with regulation here in the UK? And the second thing is, you know, London is a very different city from Austin, as in we're older, we've got narrower roads, and lots of people are willing to jaywalk, if you like. How is the technology there, frankly, even today, to deal with all those different challenges?
Yeah, so I think what you've seen is really incredible growth in the capabilities of this technology over the last 10 years, right? It's been actually sort of quite a long time coming and very steadily been improving. And now what you see is the ability for these vehicles with all of their, 360-degree sensing, cameras, LiDAR, radar, able to operate in very complex environments and actually not only operate safely, but operate effectively and be able to move through traffic, yield appropriately, but also take their turns and not get taken advantage of. And even in the UK, where there's going to be narrower roads or different types of environments, these vehicles are starting to gain much more exposure as they go, as companies go from one city to the next, they start to learn more about what general driving is like, not just what it takes to drive in one specific city, and we expect to see that continue to grow.
And just very, very, very finally, I've got my phone in my hands. When do you reckon in London or somewhere in the UK that I'll be able to open up the Uber app and be in an autonomous vehicle? Have you got a date in mind that we can say, by this date, it'll definitely be an option for me and other Uber users?
I love how excited you are to experience the technology. I think we believe that there's probably lots of consumers like you in the UK and in London who are equally excited to see this tech. I can't promise a certain date, but know that it's definitely top on our list, and we're looking forward to work both collaboratively with our technology partners as well as with regulators to make sure we can bring it there in a way that everybody will be excited about, have trust of all stakeholders, and get cars on the road.
I am genuinely excited, but I'm excited for maybe a short journey in a city rather than bombing it down the M6 at like 80 miles per hour without a driver. I'm not entirely sure I'm comfortable about that. Anyway, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, looking at how the markets are doing. FTSE hasn't really moved much today. All the details on that and much more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
The Chancellor is looking for ways to promote growth.
Today, I want to talk about economic growth.
What plans will Rachel Reeves forecast for this spring?
Our growth prospects.
And will they bloom?
To British growth for growth, driving economic growth.
Get the full story first on Sky News.
Growth is the #1 mission.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. I've covered Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent. Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for that. Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
1,500 movies. I don't want this flight to end. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Right, let's get more on those markets now. Speak to Anna MacDonald, investment manager at Aubrey Capital Management. Anna, always a pleasure. Just going to start with Tesla, whose shares are going back up again.
Yeah, they're up over 9% today. We've got to remember, though, that's after a fall from a peak of around 40%. So I think there's quite a lot of people coming in to try and buy the dip, as it's called.
But at the same time, they're also talking about these, so you saw before the break, autonomous vehicles, particularly in China. You know, for a lot of people, it's a company still worth backing, isn't it?
Yes, and it has been an extraordinary innovator in the electric vehicle space, but that has attracted competitors. And one of the biggest ones is BYD, Build Your Dreams, in China. And they've actually announced today that they've hit the $100 billion milestone in sales before Tesla has. And if you look at the market capitalization of BYD, it's less than a fifth of what Tesla's is. So there are ways to buy into that electrical vehicle trend which don't involve backing Tesla.
Yeah, but also at the same time, I saw the New York Times have just pushed notifications saying that this is around SpaceX, saying that, you know, his company SpaceX is going to see billions in federal contracts. I.e., what I'm trying to say about Elon Musk is, you know, he's still best friends with one of the most powerful people in the world who, you know, can give him contracts. He's someone you wouldn't necessarily want to bet against, if you get what I mean.
No, and Tesla's the only way that a stock market investor can access that, because SpaceX private, Starlink's private, X is private. So it is the only way that one can back Musk. That's a double-edged sword, though, because a lot of people don't want to back Musk and Trump. And, you know, that's been particularly prevalent in Europe, where sales were actually down 45% in January.
And let's bring it back to the UK, if we can here, Anna, because we're all waiting, of course, for the spring statement on Wednesday. What are you looking out for, if you like, from Rachel Reeves?
Well, she's going to be talking about the world having changed since the budget in October, which was just a few days before Trump was elected. And she's right, the world has changed. There's been a lot of pretty chaotic talk about tariffs and trade barriers. However, what we do know is that the Office of Budget Responsibility is going to be cutting their economic growth forecasts. And that means that for her, the fiscal headroom that she's left at the last budget has been wiped out, and she's going to have to look for savings elsewhere. So we're going to be getting more detail about that.
OK, Anna, as always, a pleasure. Live there in Edinburgh. Thank you very much indeed, Anna MacDonald. Thank you. OK, that is it for me on Business Live for today. Back, of course, tomorrow morning at 11:30. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it is the News Hour with Mark Austin from 5. Stay tuned for that, and I'll see you tomorrow.